Okay, guys, well, we might get going and people might just join in just over the next few minutes and hopefully they won't miss too much. Welcome along to our webinar this afternoon. My name is Anne-Maree and having a quick flick through this list, I know a lot of you, so hey guys, how are you? Hope you're all doing really well. Today's topic is using Excel formulas and in particular, using Excel formulas to speed up your spreadsheets. Been using Excel for a horrifyingly long time, about 21 years, I think, is how long I've been using Excel. And one of the things that I've really seen over and over again is people using Excel, but without a formula in sight. And I think this really, it really lessens the capacity of Excel, and it becomes it may as well be a word table for all intents and purposes. What formulas bring to Excel is a level of automation, a level of speed, and a real power that you don't get in any other way. So what I'm hoping to take you guys through this afternoon is some really great formulas, some great tips, and some really cool ways that you can do what you need to do and speed it up, get it done quickly, and get it done in a way that means that you're not doing it over and over and over again as well. And I think that's really important. So hopefully you're all hooked in, hopefully you're all strapped in and ready to go, and we are going to get started. So before we do get started, what I thought I would start off with is just to say that you will receive a link to the replay of this webinar. I'm going to cover a lot in the next hour, and depending on where you are in your Excel journey, some of it initially may seem a little overwhelming and a little bit too much. What I want you to do this afternoon is just sit back and enjoy the ride. Have a look at what I'm going to show you, maybe have ticking away in the back of your head some ways that you could maybe use some of these tools, but don't necessarily feel that you need to take all of this in straight away. The other thing is that not every formula is going to work for you. Excel is such a unique tool and everybody uses it in really different ways. So some formulas might initially grab you and you'll go, oh my goodness, that's exactly what I'm looking for. For others, you might go, nah, I'm not going to use that. And that's okay as well. So just keep that in mind. Try not to get overwhelmed, and I will do my best to take you through these as simply as possible. What I thought we would start with are some formula basics. Now, I know some of you guys have used Excel before. Some of you have potentially built formulas before, but I really just wanted to make sure we were all on the same page. And one of the very, very first things I need to share with you is that we put the equal sign at the front of the formula. We don't put it at the end like we do in a traditional mathematical equation. So in Excel, what that equal sign does is it says, do whatever comes next, do whatever follows. And it's that equal sign that creates the really big difference between equals 3 plus 2 and 3 plus 2 equals. If you put 3 plus 2 equals into Excel, you won't actually get a result. It'll just say 3 plus 2 equals and nothing else will happen. What then happens in your spreadsheet is that the formula itself is shown up in the formula bar and the answer is actually shown in your spreadsheet. So what you should usually see in a spreadsheet is the answer to whatever formula you've created and not the actual formula itself. You'll see this as we go through and look at our different options today. So this little guy up here, where that little FX is, that's our formula bar. You're going to see that a lot over the next hour or so. So just keep an eye on that as we go through. So I've just got a little hand up here. I'm just going to double check, make sure I haven't got any questions. Okay. Let me just check here. Okay, sorry about that, guys. Missed a button. And we should be good to go. Sorry about that. Okay, so you haven't missed anything so far. You just missed me rambling. And we've got our formula bar here. That's what I was sharing with you before. And we've also got our answer showing up down the bottom here. Okay, love a technical hitch first off the bat. The other thing to keep in mind as we're going through today is the importance of the cell reference. What we are talking about here is the name that Excel gives to the cell. So running across the top in Excel, you have your column references. So A, B, C, D, E, F, G, etc., etc. And in Excel, you have over 16,000 of these columns, just to freak you out a little bit. And running down the left-hand side, you have your row references, 1, 2, 3, 4, down to over 1 million. So you have this insane amount of space at your disposal. Where those two meet, so where a column and a row intersect, that forms our cells. And they are named by the letter of the column and the number of the row. So C5, that's what that reference is. Now, what that means in terms of your spreadsheets and in terms of your formulas is that we try and use those cell references when we're creating our formula. So instead of saying equals 3 plus 2, we would say equals B3 plus C3. And what this gives us is several advantages. Number one is that we can change the numbers inside those cells and our answer will automatically update. And it means that we can create these dynamic spreadsheets, which are going to be much, much more powerful. Okay, just checking you're all good, and it seems like we're in a good space. Now, the other place the cell reference shows up, it does show up in the name box. Now, you guys don't have a spreadsheet to work off here. I'm going to pull one up in a second, and I do have that attached in the handouts. So later on down the track, you can sort of follow through with me, but I think the best idea for the next 50 odd minutes is just to watch through and keep an eye on what I'm actually doing. So the name box, which just sits at the start of the formula bar, that also shows you your cell reference, and sometimes it'll actually show you a name, and we'll get to that a little bit later on as well. But that can just help you in terms of building your formula. So having a look up on the screen, what we have here happening is just a little formula being created. So we have the ability equals B3 plus C3, and then our answer goes in. Now here we get a little bit technical, but hopefully we're not going to cause too much trouble here. I'm going to introduce you to a feature called order of operations. Now, what the order of operations is the way in which a formula is constructed doesn't necessarily mean that that's the way that that formula is processed. And if you can think back to, about year 6, year 7 maths, what you have is this feature called BEDMAS, could be called PEDMAS with a P instead of a B. BODMAS is another one. Different regions and different areas sort of approach this a little bit differently. I've always learnt BEDMAS, and it's brackets, exponents, division, multiplication, addition, subtraction. What this means in the lovely world of Excel is that the way that these formulas are worked through depends on that order of operations. So in this first example here, if we were to go left to right, 8 plus 4 is 12, multiplied by 2 is 24. But you can see the answer here is 16. Now, how does it get that? Well, what it's actually doing is order of operations, because multiplication comes before addition. 4 is being multiplied by 2 to give us 8. Then we add it to 8 and we get 16. If we put brackets around something, that would force that to do it in a slightly different way. So if I had bracketed the 8 plus 4, that would happen first because brackets is the first step. Now, this freaks people out who don't understand maths or don't like maths or hate maths or think maths is the work of the devil. But Excel is going to follow this. So what's really important, and just to keep in mind when you're working with your formulas, is to not only put the formula into Excel, but to, good old-fashioned get out a piece of paper, get out a calculator, and actually work it out mathematically, as well as putting the formula into Excel. And what that does is that will give you some feedback in terms of, am I doing it the right way? Am I getting the same answer in Excel as I'm getting offline? There's a few different ways that you need to have a bit of a think about that. So very, very, very important is that bed mass, bottom mass, all those different lovely explanations. Now, one last thing, and this is something people don't like, is that Excel is about maths. And you don't necessarily have to have a great understanding of maths to be a successful Excel user, but you do need to put a bit of effort into understanding the maths behind how something works. So a couple of examples might be that Excel doesn't have a built-in formula that will let you work out, if a student has done an exam and their mark is out of 70, there's no built-in formula in Excel that says turn that into a mark out of 100 or allocate that to 50% of the mark. You've actually got to use maths to do that. So you've got to sort of work out what's the mathematical reasoning behind something, and then you can transfer that to Excel. Another example would be if you wanted to increase the price of your products by 10%. Now, you could find out what 10% of your product price was and add it onto the top. But mathematically, adding 10% to something is 110%. So if you multiply the price of something by 110%, you're actually getting the same result, but you're getting it a little bit quicker. So think about the maths behind what you're doing, and, hopefully that will start to, improve. And people often laugh at me when they ask me something in Excel. What I'll quite often do is I'll grab a piece of paper and I'll do some mathematical scribbles on it. And the reasoning is I need to know how to do it in real life before I actually bring it across into Excel. Okay. So we can build formulas in Excel. You saw a couple there, this number plus this number, that number multiplied by another number. But Excel actually comes with a huge range of built-in formulas that you are able to access. And one of the first places people see these is actually in the functions library. Now, the functions library is found on the formulas ribbon in Excel. And this guy we are going to get to a little bit later on. We're actually going to use him greatly for the next 40 or so minutes. But that function library is actually something I don't spend a lot of time in. So I don't spend a lot of time going through that functions library and adding in, I don't go hunting through financial or logical or date and time. A, I think it's a really slow process. And B, I think it's a really clunky process. And there's better ways to do it. So if you need to use a function in Excel, always start with Google. or your favorite search engine, which is always Google because that's everyone's favorite search engine. And you can see here I've just done a Google search on the best Excel formula for tallying up survey results. And what I get provided to me are all of these different tutorials and step-by-steps that I can start to go through, and that will lead me in the right direction. So, you know, having done this before and knowing what options are coming up, I know that the count if formula is being shown to me over and over again here. I can then look into how that particular formula works. I can come back into Excel and I can use that. So keep an eye on that, and don't necessarily think that that functions library is the way to go, because it's a bit of a slow process, really. So let's break formulas down into their structure. So every single formula in Excel has a pattern. And what I like to tell people is to focus on this pattern, because from the most simple to the most complicated formula in Excel, this pattern actually doesn't change. That's really nice to know, because once you get used to the pattern, you start to look for similarities rather than differences. If you're always looking for differences, Excel becomes overwhelming very, very quickly. So every formula, regardless of how simple or how complicated it is, has this formula. It has the equal sign at the front. It has the name of the formula. Now, there are over 415 built-in formulas in Excel. Yes, that's a lot. And where it gets even more fun is they combine with each other. So one formula in Excel may actually contain 3 different functions. And so you you get this infinite pool of formulas at your disposal. So we always have the name. It could be if, it could be sum, it could be count, it could be product. There's a whole, as I said, 415 different options here. Then always, 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 there is a set of brackets. Now, sometimes these brackets have 1 argument in them. Sometimes they have 2. Sometimes they have 255. Sometimes they actually have none. So the simplest of the formulas actually don't have any arguments there. But what those arguments do, they're the bits of information that Excel need to complete their formula. So if we look at the simplest formula in Excel, I'm going to show you how this works in a couple of seconds, is now. Here's our equal sign. Oops. Here's our equal sign. There is the name of our formula, and there are the brackets. Then we have a slightly more complicated formula. This is the sum ifs formula. I'm also going to show you how this one works today. And as you can see here, we have a little bit more going on. So every time you see a comma, that is a new argument. So sum range 1, criteria 1, range 2, each one of those is an argument. We then go to a horrifying formula, and what a lot of people will do at this point is absolutely run a mile. They'll go, no, that's not what I'm interested in. Get me out of here. I don't want to know anything else about this. So, as horrifying as that is, the process is actually still the same. There's our equal sign, there's the name of our formula, and in brackets there are our arguments. So as I'm teaching you these formulas today, keep an eye on them, have a little bit of a think about them, and you'll go really well. Okay, we are going to jump over into Excel. Okay, so hopefully you guys can see what is going on here at the moment. So I'm using Excel Office 365. Is the latest version of Excel available. Some of you are going to be on slightly different things, different versions. If you're on a Mac, you're going to see things slightly differently. But on the whole, hopefully you'll be able to follow along and keep an eye on what we're doing. You guys are going to get a copy of this so you can go away and practice later on down the track. So I thought we'd kick off with the simple formulas. And if we have a look here, I have a formula that is going to show me the date and the time. So all we do, we put in the equal sign and I start typing. Now what happens when you start typing in Excel is it will start coming up with a range of suggestions that you're going to use. So what we're seeing here is not only the name of the formula, we're also seeing a little screen tip that tells me what that formula is going to do. So this one returns the current date and time formatted as a date and time. So I put my brackets in because my formula won't be complete without them. And that's actually all the information I need to give Excel. When I click enter, it puts in today's date and time. So it's the 30th of the 4th at exactly 13:22. It's actually just being pulled from my system. So that's a really cute formula. Another one is if you just need the date. Now, these are dynamic. They're not going to change in front of your eyes. But if I was to close this spreadsheet down and save it and open it at a later date, the formula would be the exact time that I opened that particular spreadsheet. So that's pretty cool. The other one that's really nice is the today formula. Now the today formula is actually just going to give me today's date. So there we go, 30th of the 4th, 2018. So both of these formulas, they're a bit cute. They're not great value on their own, but in a little bit, I'm actually going to show you how you can use these formulas with other formulas, namely working out someone's age. There's a really great little formula there. Now, interestingly, despite the fact that Excel gives you a formula for date and time, it gives you a formula for date as well, it actually doesn't give you a formula for time, but we can be a little bit sneaky here. So we can actually have now, so I've got my equal sign, so I'm going to put the now formula in, and then I'm going to take away the today formula. So what I'm doing here is I'm saying, here's my date and time. I'm going to take away my date. And I get this weird, funky little, decimal point number. All that is actually today's time or the current time in decimal format. And I can use my number format up here. If I just choose time as my answer, it is 1:24 and 27 seconds. So you can get really clever with some of these things as well. So that's just showing you that structure, how those formulas are built, and with no arguments, they become really easy. I'm going to jump across and we're going to sort of work our way from some simple ideas here to something with a little bit of complexity. So when you look at Excel, I'm just going to click here, the idea is that we always put our formula where we want our answer. Now, our answer can live anywhere. For the purposes of simplicity today, most of my answers are going to live right next to their data. But answers can live on a separate sheet, on a separate tab, on a separate cell. They can actually even live in a separate worksheet altogether. And if we look at Excel, on our home ribbon, so I'm on my home ribbon up here, I have an auto sum button. There's a little drop down there that gives me 5 different formulas: sum, average, count numbers, max and min. And these are just the basic formulas that Excel thinks everyone is going to need on a regular basis. Now, it's basically a little bit of a 4-step process here. I click where I want my answer. I come up to auto sum and I want to total these numbers up. So I would choose the sum formula for this one. And what Excel does at this point is it goes hunting for numbers. So it actually comes up and it says, these are the numbers that I want to work with. It's not always right, and we're going to see that in a second, but this has actually picked up the numbers that I want to add up. You can see the structure of the formula down here, my equal sign, the name of the formula, which is sum, and in brackets, the arguments, which are the numbers that I would like to add up. The 4th step, once I've checked that that's okay, is I just hit enter on my keyboard and it has tallied up those numbers for me. Now, because I used cell references, and you can see that up here in my formula bar, If I change some of these, if I realize that there had been a mistake made, my dynamic formula is always going to show me the answer. Moving along, we have the ability to also work out average. So we have the same numbers here. I just go up, so I click where I want my answer. I choose the formula that I would like. I double check that it's looking for the right numbers, and I hit enter on my keyboard to get my average. One last one using the same technique. Here we have the ability to find minimum and maximum. So min is the formula. Again, look at that structure. You're starting to hopefully see these similarities. And again, it's picked up the right numbers, so I don't need to do anything. But now we're going to encounter a problem. The minute I go to put this max formula in, what's actually going to happen, and we'll nothing like showing you to show you how this is going to get it wrong. The minute that I choose max, you can see that it's picked up the nearest numbers or the closest numbers it can find. But what it's actually done is it's also included the minimum number. Now that actually wouldn't impact my answer here, but in a lot of our formulas, that is absolutely going to impact it, and we're going to start to end up with incorrect values. So all we do here, we've got our structure. The only bit we need to change is the arguments or these numbers that our formula is looking at. Now, what I see a lot here is people going backspace or delete and changing that whole thing. This is actually already selected. All you need to do is click and drag over the right numbers, enter on your keyboard, and I chose min instead of max. Let me just do that one again. There we go. There's max. So I just click and drag, hit enter, and the correct answer goes in. So don't try backspacing. The other thing that I sometimes see people doing is that they click, on this little guy and they try and move that around. That's really fiddly when you're in the middle of creating formulas. So just be a little bit careful there. A nice little one here, they might just sort of show you a quick little bonus tip while we're going through. If you were to open up this spreadsheet and you were to look at it, there is really nothing about it that says, look at me, I'm a formula. And that can be really difficult when you're working with spreadsheets that other people have created. And what you can sometimes do is it can be really, you can get lost, basically. That's probably the words I'm trying to find. So you need a really simple technique to be able to show you what's the data in this spreadsheet and what is actually a formula. One of the nice ways to do it is just through visuals. So on your home ribbon, right at the very end, you've got this little find and select section. And one of the choices in there is find and select formulas. Now, straight off the bat, you can see here it has highlighted those two cells that I just created. And what we can do is you can either just go, yep, that's brilliant, that's really nice, I'm glad I know where the formulas are. But if you want to keep that as a bit of a visual, I just come up to a fill color and I just pick one. And that means that by looking at my spreadsheet now, I now know which cells have the formula and which cells don't. It's just a nice little visual to help you along. Moving along to a group of formulas that we call the count formulas. Now you can see I've got about 4 little tabs in this section. I'm just going to take you through these. I think for a lot of you watching today, I think these are going to be some of the more powerful formulas that you're going to have access to. The count formulas are a way of automating what we traditionally do, by hand or, with a pen, and we physically go through and count. And I'm going to show you the most basic of the count formulas, but almost to say to you, it's probably the weakest of the lot. It's called the count formula, and it actually does appear in this little auto sum drop down up here. The only feature of this formula is it counts up how many cells have a number in them. Now, don't know about you, I don't need this one very much. So if I was to click in this cell where I want my answer, I'm going to pull up the count numbers formula, and you can see that it doesn't know what to do. It actually can't find any values because there's none sort of right near it. But I'm going to tell it that I want it to go and look at these cells. So it was waiting for that information. It didn't have it, so it's waiting for that information from me. So if you have a look at the data I have here, I have the numbers 1 and 2, I have a date, I have a time, I also have the word dog and cat. Now, if you were to think about numbers in a very traditional sense, most of you are probably expecting this formula to return a 2. The 1 and the 2 are both numbers. What it should give me, and what it does give me, is actually a 4, because date and time are both seen by Excel as being numerical values. The dog and the cat, funnily enough, not so much. So that's all it does. It just returns a value and says to you, you have this many numbers in your spreadsheet. So that might be handy for some of you. The next formula, however, I really think is something that a lot of you are going to want to know about if you're not already using it. It's called the count if formula. And the power of this one is that it counts up pretty much whatever you ask it to. So here I have some lovely animals. I have dog, cats and birds. And I want to know, for example, how many times the word dog appears, how many times the word cat appears. What the count if formula does is it goes through and does that for me. Now what we're going to jump into here is what is called the insert function. So you've seen me typing a few formulas here or using this auto sum drop down. How do we get to the other 410 formulas? We get to them using the insert function dialog. Now this appears all over Excel. On your formula bar, you've got the little FX just there. In the auto sum drop down, you have more functions, and that will take you to the same place. And a little bit harder to get to, but if you happen to be here, over on the formulas bar, you have the insert function there as well. So, there's a few different ways that you can get to it. I always use this little guy. I always just use the insert function on the formula bar. It's the easiest one to get to. I don't have to go out of my way, and it's pretty much always there unless you've done something to turn that off. When you click on the insert function, it brings you to the insert function dialog, and sort of broken up into two places. You've got search up the top, you've got select down the bottom. This whole type a brief description, don't worry about that. I know what formula I'm looking for, which is count if. So I just click on it and hit go, and it will just bring it to the top of my list here. I click OK. And the second part of this is it's actually asking for the 2 arguments that are needed to make this formula do its job. So with all the other formulas we've used, there's only been 1 argument, and that's usually just been what cells do you want me to go and have a look at. Here, we still need that. We still need the range, but we're also going to give it a criteria as well. So the range are these numbers. Now, notice what I just did there. I'm just going to click out of there again. I didn't minimize anything. I didn't move anything. All I did was made sure that my mouse or my cursor was there, and then clicked and dragged across the range of cells that I wanted to count. Now, I could go further here. I could have dragged down further if I thought that I was going to add to this later on down the track. But at the moment, that's all I'm happy for. I then type the word dog, because that's what I'm looking for. Now, I'm just going to click out of there for a second, because what I want to show you is the quotation marks or the speech marks that just got put around outside that. Excel has this little quirk where if you use a name or a word as part of your Excel formula, you do need to just pop little quotation marks around it, and that will make the formula work. The beauty of using insert formula or insert function is it does it for you. but keep an eye out because you'll notice them sort of magically appearing and maybe wondering why. When we click OK, it tells me that 3 times the word dog appeared in that range of cells. So think about this in terms of if you were doing surveys or any type of data calculations. This particular formula just has so much power. It's incredible how much you can actually do with this. If I was to continue that process, I could do another one, and I'll do this one really quickly. Is in that same group of cells, I now want to find out cat. Now, I'm doing it in lowercase just to show you that it still works. Okay, it's not case sensitive. It's not particularly worried about whether you're using upper or lowercase, so don't worry too much about that. So to do this properly, I would then, put some labels in, and I'm starting to build my data. Very simple data in this scenario, but not necessarily. So for those of you who are working with funding bodies or trying to categorize your clients or your workers into different sections, this particular formula has, an incredible power to it. This formula has been around pretty much forever, or as long as I can remember as well. But about 8 or so years ago, what they actually introduced was a slight variation to this formula. This one's called the count ifs formula. Notice the S being added. What this formula does is it takes that brilliant counting capacity and it really amps it up to a whole new level. So here we have people's, let's say, for example, some clients' genders, and we have age. Now, for reporting or for statistics or just for your own peace of mind, you might be wondering, how many males above the age of 65 you have in your care, or how many females between the ages of 20 and 30 attended your training course. There's a whole range of ways or a whole bunch of reasons that you might want to think about these statistics. So the count ifs formula, and again, I've clicked where I want my answer. Notice that's sort of a step that never gets missed. I click on insert function. This time I'm going to search for count ifs. I'm going to add that little S on the end just to bring the formula up to the top. And I click on OK. Now, initially, this looks almost identical to where we just were. It just wants the range and it wants the criteria. So my first range is going to be the gender. My first criteria is going to be male. Notice I now have a second range that's sort of popped up. So it's going to allow me to keep going. So I pick a second range of data and it's asking for a second criteria. I suggested that over the age of 65 might be a good criteria. So I'm going to use the greater than symbol, put 65 in. Now you can see that criteria 3 has appeared. This will actually keep generating. And I think it will let you put 255 separate criterias in here in terms of providing your information. Now, when I click on OK, the number 2 returns. So you can see here, I have a male who is 83. I have a male who is 91. They are my 2 males above the age of 65. And that's the data that I've been able to pull out of my spreadsheet. Pretty impressive. And if you start to think about the data you are trying to report on or calculate, little formulas like that can make all the difference. Now, interestingly, and just a slight deviation, what a lot of people are doing these days is, using customer relationship management software, and there's absolutely nothing wrong with using proprietary software to find information like this. But for those of you who are still using Excel, and sometimes your databases don't really give you the reports you're looking for, you can bring the data out of your report, put it into Excel, and that way you've got a little bit more control. And the last count formula I wanted to show you is good old Count Blank, who I never fail to joke that it sounds like a Sesame Street character. And the beauty of this one, particularly for you doing survey results, is that it shows you the unanswered questions, or how many times something didn't get filled in or didn't get responded to. So again, I'm just going to type this one in because it's nice and quick. But when I type in Count Blank, pop my little bracket up, it really just wants to know where I want to look. So I would come over here, hit enter, and it tells me that I have one unanswered question. So 5 said yes, 5 said no, 1 unanswered. Something I did there very quickly, and I'm used to doing this, I didn't put my final bracket on there. As soon as I had selected my range, I didn't bother to pop that last little bracket on. I just hit enter and it puts it on there for me. So that's a nice little time-saving tip for you there as well. The formula will still work. Another bonus tip while we're here, I showed you how to find your formulas. Okay, showed you how to use the find and select so that you could see what cells had a formula in them. But what if you want to see all the formulas in your spreadsheet? You don't want to click on the cell and then come up here to see what the formula was that gave you that answer. You want to see them all at once. On your keyboard, you have a key called the tilde key. On most keyboards, it's just above tab on the left-hand side. Now, if I do Control tilde, what it actually does is it expands out all the formulas on my spreadsheet and shows me what they look like, how they've been created, how they've been formed. And particularly when you have been handed a spreadsheet that someone else has created, a very nice trick is to turn this feature on. So it's called Show Formulas. So do your little Control tilde, print that or take a screenshot so that if you ever delete the formulas that someone else created, you've got a copy of them now and you can recreate them further down the track. I can't tell you how many times I hear from workers that they've inherited the spreadsheet from the person before them, didn't realize how important a cell was and accidentally deleted it and had no idea what formula was sitting inside there that did the job. So by doing Control tilde, hitting print, turning it into a PDF, saving it, whatever you want to do, you've then got a record of what formula actually created that answer. Just remember to turn it back off again, which is a simple Control tilde, and you're good to go and continue working as normal. Now, does anyone might have a quick 2-second. Has anyone got any quick questions at this point before I throw you into some more formulas? I think we're good. Have a think. I'm going to check in with you in about 10 seconds. So maybe over the next sort of 5 minutes or so, just, pop any questions you have in there and we'll have some time to answer those at the end. Okay, jumping up the complexity level just a little. Going to talk to you now about a group of formulas called the logical formulas. Now, again, these don't have to be as hard as they look, but I think one of the biggest problems with Excel is they throw things like this at us. This is the structure of a spreadsheet formula. This is the if formula, and it has the arguments logical test, value if true, value if false. 3 separate arguments, and you do need all 3 to make this formula work. When we use the insert function, however, this doesn't necessarily have to be as hard as it seems. And what I particularly love about the if formula is it takes a huge range of information and categorizes it for me based on the information I give it. So for example here, we have the ability to take student marks and turn them into pass or fails. We can also use this in our services. We might categorize volunteers into gold, silver and bronze, depending on how long they've been volunteering for an organisation. We might put in a code that tells us whether someone needs a wheelchair or a second carer when we go on an outing for transport. We might have information that only tells us, what meals to give someone based on their dietary requirements. This is one of those the sky is the limit formulas. It's really just a matter of looking at the data you have and the information you would like to present, and the whole thing can really go anywhere. So the process is the same. We click where we want our answer. We click on our insert function, and I can see if here, but I'm just going to type it in and hit go just so we're repeating the process. And we double click to open him up. So you can see here are the 3 arguments we need. The logical test, what happens if it's true, what happens if it's false. The logical test is the only bit that really requires a great deal of thought. And here, let's stick with the really basic. If a student gets a mark above 50, they pass. If they don't, they fail. That's what happens if it's true. That's what happens if it's false. So again, I use the information I already have to build my formula. So if that number that's in B4 is greater than 50, there's my test. Okay, so using this insert function, that process becomes really simple. You can already see Excel has evaluated that argument and it's telling me that it's false. His mark is not greater than 50. So whatever information I put in these 2 options, it's going to return the false value and not the true one. If it's true, the student is going to pass. If it's not, the student is going to fail. Notice those quotation marks going in again because I've used words. If I had used numbers there, I wouldn't have actually seen those. So there's the 3 bits of information I need. The logical test is the mark greater than 50. If it is, put the word pass. If it's not, put the word fail. I click OK, and poor Tony, for the 7 billionth time in my life, he actually fails, and the formula has evaluated that. Now, as you can see here, I have 12 or 13 students. I do not want to go through that process time and time and time again. Here's where the fill handle comes in. Here's another little bonus tip. When a formula needs to be the same, row after row, column after column, you only need to get the formula right once. And make sure it's right. Make sure you've actually got the formula correct before you go any further here. This little fill handle, I can use this in a couple of different ways. I can drag the formula down. Now, if I undo that, it's a tiny, tiny little square just in the bottom right-hand corner. What happens, you'll see your mouse change. It'll turn from a white cross, which is select, a cross with arrows, which is move. You really want it to be just that plain, tiny little black cross there that's very hard to see. You click, you drag, and it will copy the formula down. And because we used cell references, every time we move this down, the formula is actually going to change to match the row that it's on. And that's one of the great features about using these, is that we get that ability to automate some of these great features. And a slightly quicker way, if I just undo that one as well, you can also just double click. And what that will do is it will copy it down until it runs out of data. Now, I mentioned earlier, I've been using Excel for 21 years. I learnt that one last year. So that particular feature has existed for a really long time. But just by double clicking on the fill handle, it'll actually stop at the point it runs out of data. So whenever it gets to a point where it's got no more information, that's where that actually stops. Very, very cool. Okay. The if formula, as I said, on its own, brilliant, so many uses. I could have given that information that said, if a client is older than 65, move to this funding. If not, do something else. It's purely a matter of thinking about how you want to use it. I can also combine it. Now, we haven't seen a combination yet. This is how we can combine two different formulas in the same formula to get a really great result. So here I've got some information that I used earlier. I've got the gender and I've got their age. So what I can do here is, instead of just looking for one bit of information to evaluate, I can actually ask for two bits of information to evaluate. So this is using a formula called and combining it with a formula called if. This one takes a bit of thinking, so don't stress too much here, okay? So just have a bit of a watch. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to open up my insert function. I'm going to choose my if formula again. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to put this little bit in as my logical test. See how here we almost have a formula within a formula. We've got an A3 needs to be something, and B3 needs to be something. So they both need to be true. So if I say and, notice I'm actually just typing this in, A3, and again, I'm not worried about capital letters or anything like that, equals male. Oops, it's not an equal sign. A3 equals male. And notice it says false, but that's okay, because notice A3 is female. Now I'm going to put a comma in because I need two arguments. And B3 is greater than 65. So I need both bits of information to be true. I want the first column to be a male, and I want the second column to be greater than 65. If it's true, I'm going to keep this really basic, male over 65. If it's false, I actually don't want anything, because that's the information I'm looking for here. I just want to know my male's over 65, and I want to be able to see that at a glance. I don't want to have to think about it. So what I'm going to do, I'm just going to put two empty quotation marks in. So it basically means show me one thing if it's true, don't show me anything if it's false. Now, notice we've got a false up here. So when I click OK, I should see nothing. Okay, I should get an empty cell, and that's exactly what I've got. Now, I'm just going to move this up here so we can see it a little bit better. And then I'm going to autofill down my column. There's my male over 65. Yes, that's true. Male in that column, over 65 in that column. And there's my second one there. So what I've done here is, rather than have to look at every entry at a glance, I can now see which ones are my males over 65, or my children between the ages of 3 and 4, or my marks above 80, or my whatever you want that to be. You've automated this so that when that male becomes 67, the minute that happens, my formula kicks in and I get that result showing up. So that's really, really powerful as well. And I might leave that one for now. Okay, I need to show you this one, because this one is one of the coolest formulas out there. But again, no one knows it because it looks really, really complicated. Do you know what I do? I have this somewhere and I just copy and paste it. I mentioned when we were looking at the start that you can use the today formula with in lots of different ways. And one of the ways you can do it is to work out how old someone is. The birth date is a really, really interesting one, and Excel has struggled, and you can look at this formula here and see why that's so complicated. But if you've got someone's birthday, using this formula, literally copy this formula, you can work out their exact age. That's exactly what I'm going to do. I'm not even going to type this one up. So I'm going to copy. I'm going to come up here and I'm going to paste it in. Now, hopefully you can see what's missing. I'm missing my equal sign. I'm going to pop my equal sign at the beginning. And I just need to change this bit. Okay, so where that says birth date, I don't want birth date because that doesn't mean anything. I want the actual birth date. So I've just got a birth date in here. And it's actually using 3 different formulas here, the int formula, the year fraction formula, and it's also got the today formula. And the reason I've got the today formula in there is because I really want to make sure that it's updating all the time. Now, when I hit return, I get 92. And someone born on the 23rd of the 4th, 1926, would absolutely be 92 today. So that formula is really great, and it's a good example of how these formulas, you can start to multiply them and pull them in and start to really get some great ideas. Okay, we are getting very close to time. Do we have anyone with any questions that they would like to ask, or is there something in particular you would like to ask? Just pop it into the question section there and then I can answer that. Have we got any questions? Hands up if I've scared you. Hit your little hands up button if you're freaking out a little bit right about now. No, only joking. Hopefully I haven't freaked you out. Oh no, there's a couple of hands up. Excel can be really complicated, and I hopefully this webinar has just opened your eyes a little bit to what's possible, I think, with Excel. Okay, I'm not seeing any questions here. So I've got a few more minutes. I might just show you 1 or 2 more great little things. Paste values is a really powerful command. You might think it's got nothing to do with Excel, but it really does. So what you can actually do is what often happens is if you were to copy the answer that's been created by a formula and you need to use that information somewhere else, you can come across to a new tab or a new sheet, and when you paste, you'll actually get a reference or an error showing up. Instead of pasting straight off the bat, so if I undo that one, if you come down into paste special, you can just see I'm right-clicking to paste there. One of the choices you'll get is to paste values, or you can even do values and number formats if you're doing some interesting stuff. And what that will do, really simply, it'll just actually paste the answer in. It's not linked to anything, it's not connected, but you've been able to pull out the information there, and you'll always have the right answer. So that's really handy when you need to use the information you've garnered through a formula and you need to use that somewhere else. Okay, we have time up. I'm just seeing, do we have any little questions? No, we don't. I would like to thank you all for joining me today. Now, for those of you who are out in the central and around the far west, keep an eye out. I will be traveling out into your region over the next few months. So if you want me to pop in and give you some help with your spreadsheets, I am more than happy to do that. I do encourage you to follow along on my Facebook page, AMK Training and Consulting. I often just pop up little tips and great bits of information that I find up there. It's also a way to find out, as well as following Leap and signing up to CommunityNet. It's a great way to keep in touch with what's coming up and what is happening. And it's also a place where you can send me messages as well. So if you have any questions or queries or any feedback, I would love to hear it. And you'll also get a little bit of a feedback form to fill in after today's presentation. So absolutely would love to hear how you're going and hear how today's webinar might be able to help you. That's it from me today, guys. It has been an absolute pleasure. Sorry about the little glitch at the beginning, and have a wonderful rest of your Monday and the rest of the week.